Hello and welcome to your game review. We'll have a look at this game in which we blundered a pawn quite early on, though we did manage to outplay the opponent a little bit later. So this was some grand pre-attack, bishop b5. This is of course all possible by white, but it's not really objectively sound. Knight d4, and white plays d3, and this is already a mistake. White should in general try to castle as quickly as possible, but okay, d3 and a6, but this is kind of a mistake. And sure, we can attack this bishop, but there were many more strong options. The most simple one was queen a5, and generally, of course, we don't really want to develop the queen too early, but here white is in big trouble. So firstly, if the bishop goes here, then we just win due to a nice tactic involving getting rid of the defender. We take here, he takes back, we take here, and then we take here. Otherwise, the bishop can go to c4, but now we can take on f3, and now again we're deflecting the queen. The queen cannot take because now this rook on a1 will not be defended. Therefore, white is forced to take with the g-pawn, and already it should be obvious that white is in big trouble. Not to mention we can even continue with b5 due to another defender tactic. So okay, a6, b5, we take some space. This is of course good as well, and we take this bishop. And okay, now we have to understand what's going on. So we have the bishop pair, we have the unopposed light squared bishop, and when we have the bishop pair, our goal should usually be to attack on the squares which our opponent does not have the bishop of. So here in this case we have the light squared bishop. We should put it on the long diagonal, and we should try to open the long diagonal, specifically attacking this pawn, e6 d5 or e6 f5, either way creating tension on the light squares. But here, a tactical mistake with e6, and this is a big concern, as it doesn't really matter how you develop pieces compared to how you blunder tactics and how you don't allow your opponent to capture stuff. So here, the rook has opened. We should have taken account of this new feature of the position. And before making any move, we always have to blunder check. And how can we blunder check if e6 is a blunder? We'll look at all the checks, captures, and attacks. There are no checks, there's only one capture, and there's basically no attacks. So we only had to check one move, and well, rook a6 is defended. So this is quite unfortunate. If bishop b7, white will probably castle, and then we can either play f5, which is a bit extreme maybe, but it is possible. But the main idea is probably e6 and d5. Developing like this, and if white pushes e4, we'll push d4. Otherwise, we can also play b4 to weaken the e4 pawn, and we are doing quite well with the light squared bishop. But now white is a pawn ahead, and this pawn was quite important because now we do not have any plans of c4 or b4, and we also have lost the a4 square. So now black develops pieces, but we should have probably lost another pawn here. After queen d2, white is basically just winning, and we should avoid losing in such little moves. But okay, now the position closed up a little bit. White kind of went back and forth. He was attacking a weakness here, so he should just try to attack on the queen side. But okay, knight c3. The rooks are improved, and d4, which is generally the correct solution here, as we want to open up the bishop as soon as possible, and we have the d5 square. But unfortunately, without the b pawn, we cannot really do anything else. We cannot really push c4, so even though our pieces look good, we can't really make progress, and white can make a lot of easy moves. Here white decided to just give up the c2 pawn. After rook fc1, I'm not sure what we're going to do, because white has simple plans on the king side where he is stronger with this pawn. h4, h5, knight g5, maybe knight e4, g4, f5, just attacking on the king side, and we don't really have counterplay. But okay, now we got the pawn on c2, which is at least something, and here d3, So this was well calculated by black. I assume it was calculated. Bishop a5 is a discovered attack on the knight, but after c4 the knight is defended with tempo, and after this there is knight b4, running away with the knight. So quite a nice sequence. White is still a pawn ahead, but now the pawn is a double pawn on the e-file, so the position is not that bad. Queen b7, and white decides to give up his bishop and improve black's structure by opening the rook. And now, even though again white has a pawn advantage, it doesn't really do much. Here probably actually we should have taken with the queen to have access to the weak b pawns, and if we take them we will have some nice passed pawns. Okay, now the game gets on another character. The bishop comes out for f8, which is quite common in these positions. a5 and queen b6, and now the white king somehow comes into the game, and white is still a little bit better, but it's hard to make progress. Black is making progress with his pieces, the bishop has been improved, and a few moves later finally white allows the queen into the game, very careless, and after queen e3 black is actually better, as white's king is a little bit more unsafe, and his pieces are not very well coordinated. White should, in general, try to attack on the king side all the time in these positions, where he has a pawn majority, and here black would still be doing quite well, for example like this. And after queen f2 we will get some endgame, where black will have a bishop against a knight, which is generally preferable. But after rook c7, now rook d3 happens, and after queen f2 black decided to exchange queens quite quickly. At this point we have basically no time against the opponent's 8 minutes, so maybe it's excusable to not look at more candidate moves, as at this point we're only using our instincts basically. But if queen e4, black would probably win the game quite easily, as the knight is tied down, which means the queen cannot move, and white can't really get out of this pin, and the rook alone can't really do much, while black has easy play like taking here and pushing the a pawn. But now we get this endgame, which is of course a lot better for black, as he is basically a pawn ahead on the queen side, knight d2, and now black puts his rook behind the passed pawn, which is a nice idea, and the pawn goes. White should have tried to block the pawn like this, knight b3, with the point that after this there's rook c1 going here, and maybe even bishop knight c1 to pick up the pawn. But now the game becomes quite one-sided, and bishop b4 is a nice move, threatening to at some point go to c3 while also threatening this, and white can't really defend from everything, and this pawn endgame is easily winning. So pretty well played by black after blundering a pawn in the opening, and generally strategy comes second to tactics. The most important thing by far in chess is tactics. We have to be able to see such tactics involving pins like this, and the best way to avoid such blunders is to blunder check before every single move. Here black fought for over 2 minutes, but in those 2 minutes did not check his opponent's forcing moves.